Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Mexi here once again, and I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Sonic the Hedgehog, or most people call it Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, for the Xbox 360/PlayStation 3. So, last time, we essentially did manage to only tackle through two stages in particular for the likes of the Forms of Shadows Very Hard mode, just because, like I said before, those stages can go on for way too long, especially noticeable because obviously we have to keep on finding most of those keys as route, as well as the forms of trying to deal with a lot of combat, and you pretty much named the rest of it though. So, overall, we've only done White Acropolis and Kingdom Valley, and that's all there is to it. So because of that though, yeah, nothing else to say. So today, for this video, is about the fact that we're going to be able to go back onto 3 stages per video for the majority of the forms of the Very Hard mode during the Forms of Shadows playthrough. And that's because of that, we're about to tackle through Crisis City, as well as the Forms of Flame Core, as well as Radical Train. Now, potentially speaking of, this is going to be the final time we're going to be seeing Crisis City. It wasn't until whenever we go on to Sonic Cross Shadow Generations coming up. Obviously though, we can able to actually go back onto Crisis City, thanks to the Forms of Sonic Generations portion of that specific remaster, once that particular game comes out. So because of that though, yeah, relatively speaking though, is about the fact that I'm still looking forward to able to actually replaying through Sonic Generations again, except the fact that on different platform, because potentially speaking though, like we've already established that before, the version I'm pretty sure we're most able to tackle through, which appears to be the PlayStation 4 version, just like the forms of how it does it on Sonic Colors Ultimate. And in addition to that though, because we've already did manage to able to tackle through the Xbox 360 version of Sonic Generations back in 2017, despite the fact that we somehow ignored not only the majority of the challenge acts, but it's also with the forms of collecting all of the red star rings potentially for the sake of trying to unlock concept arts and you name the rest. So yeah, generally speaking, that's all I could really say about it. Especially noticeable that I was originally trying to able to go for the Switch version, but honestly though, it's about the fact that we're only going to be able to do Switch versions for certain Sonic games in particular. Like for instance, we've already done Sonic Origins back in Journey Form Spin last year, and I was maybe considering trying to able to do a redo Let's Play of Sonic Mania for the majority of not only its base game, but also with the entire DLC as well, for the Plus portion, for likely also for the likes of the forms of the Encore mode, as well as the forms of 2 other playable characters between both Mighty, alongside with Ray the Flying Squirrel as well. So we shall see what happens in due time, especially noticeable because by that time that we can able to actually now decide to do Sonic Superstars until we basically caught up for the majority of the forms of the redo Sonic Let's Plays for the time being, so we can potentially try to able to get those games out of the way before we move on to the forms of the most recent games during that time, and some of those other games that we might consider trying to able to plan out things. So anyway, yeah, not much else I can really say about this, I'm afraid, guys. Apart from the fact that, well, today's date, of course, is I would say, today is the 17th of April today. In some cases, in 2024 today. So naturally speaking, it's about the fact that I believe we've only got about approximately 9 days to go until Knuckles the Series on Paramount Plus is going to be releasing. So because of that though, now I was potentially originally trying to conclude this entire Let's Play of the game by around the same time as when Knuckles the Series is going to come out, but of course we somehow managed to realize that, well, I did not notice that particular gameplay style has been shifted until whenever we get onto this little whirlwind section, which as a result we're going to be playing as Root, and fundamentally speaking though, thankfully though, we don't have to collect all of those keys, thankfully though, because unlike in White Acropolis as well as Kingdom Valley, that obviously though is about the fact that we have to keep on collecting keys. So I can't believe about the fact that we have to collect about 9 keys in White Acropolis and 6 keys in Journey Forms within Kingdom Valley. I mean, that's just pretty insane if you ask me. And relatively speaking, though, despite the fact that if you don't know where to go, it's even bad enough about the fact that, like I've already established that before, there's no radar system, which I could have preferred to able to actually have a radar system, just like the forms of how it does it on both Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2. But relatively speaking, I was about the fact that, because again, the game is already rushed as it is. So, alongside with the other game though, which I don't feel like trying to talk about it. So because of that though, yeah, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that when it comes to like other stuff worth noting for, in regards to the forms of what's been going on recently, well, as it turns out, no matter what though, recently we've gone back into the spring tour for Mario Kart Tour recently. Now, I was originally trying to get out of my way to able to actually obtain the next cosmetic character for Rosalina, but as it turns out, I don't think I've actually got enough rubies to able to actually unlock her, which that's fine, because obviously no matter what though, is about the fact that, like what Pac-Man has already said this before, since in Winnie the Pooh's Rumbly Tumbly Adventure for the Game Boy Advance, basically though, we somehow unlocked Explorer Toadette, thanks to the forms of certain coins that we did somehow collect for the majority of Coin Rush from the likes of the previous days ago. So, because generally speaking, I was about the fact that we somehow managed able to use the majority of the rubies by simply able to actually go ahead and, are you kidding me? There's some invisible walls here. Okay, that's fine. Because obviously, no matter what though, something tells me we must able to actually deal with a bunch of enemies. So, pretty much standard stuff for the most part. And something tells me this particular portion of this stage right here is almost based off from Silver's ending conclusion of Crisis City, which is pretty crazy if you ask me, especially concerning for the fact that something tells me, if you couldn't tell already, that unlike the forms of how it does it in the normal version of Crisis City as Shadow, that normally we were able to actually try to get onto the hang glider section in Journey forms of in normal mode alongside with hard mode, whereas it turns out in very hard mode that's not the case, because obviously if you couldn't tell, Omega, he can able to actually now experience Crisis City, because obviously though, originally though, that since it's all because of the very convoluted time travel aspect when it comes to plot device, and it's a bit tricky to say, because I'm sure enough though it's about the fact that we'll get into our proper final thoughts of Sonic 06 until whenever we get to towards the end of this particular DLC itself. So because of that though, yeah, I can't even believe by saying this, it's about the fact that we're getting very close for this point, guys. Especially noticeable because, after all, I'm pretty concerned about the fact that we've only got about 6 stages to go. Well, mind you, about the fact that we're currently doing one right now, potentially speaking of, with Crisis City and everything. So, now, as far as I'm aware, is about the fact that, do you guys even remember back in Journey Forms of around 2 days ago, that, relatively speaking now, that we have to deal with the forms of the most annoying mechanic in Journey Forms of in very hard mode in Shadow's playthrough, that basically, though, is about the fact that we have to use the Chaos Power, or specifically Kaioken mode. Basically, though, is about the fact that if you try to activate the Kaioken mode, you can able to actually clue through certain objects, specifically with laser gates, alongside with the forms of, maybe it's a possibility, about the fact that if we go onto one of those stages in particular, that you probably already know what I'm talking about. So because of that, though, as you can see right there, is about the fact that we go on to that familiar section, since in Journey Forms have been a Mark Speed section as Sonic, except now that I don't think it's possible we can able to actually go ahead and die too many times, because obviously we can able to take on the actual ride on a motorcycle, which is pretty insane, or in some cases kind of interesting, I should say. Well, relatively speaking though, because don't get your hopes up for this point just yet, because there might be a couple of times that we must able to try to deal with a bunch of enemies around. So because of that though, yeah, not much else I can really think about when it comes to Crisis City itself, apart from the fact that there is one particular section that's been absent on very hard mode. That's what appears to be body forms of, you know, with the buggy and everything. Well, that particular section is no longer the case, because unlike in hard or normal mode, it does still manage to retain the buggy section. So, yeah, that's why I was going to be thinking about that. So, and then once you deal with all the enemies on this particular part right there, then you can able to progress, and then, yeah, because despite the fact that the actual hit detection with the forms of the motorcycle can sometimes feel a bit off during in forms of some portions anyway, But anyway, let's get to the forms of the specific topics at this point. Relatively speaking now, is about the fact that as far as what, Pac-Man has already stated this before, about the fact that he's already mentioned about quite a few bits here and there, but there's one specific aspect about the fact that he totally forgot to mention about. That's what appears to be about the fact that, yes indeed, the winners has been announced for the sake of the bombs of 2024 BAFTA Game Awards. So, as a result, I won't get into more details onto that specific stuff until for later, because potentially speaking out of nowhere, I suppose we just want to get this out of the way right now, well, suffice to say, happy 15th anniversary of this particular anime special, which appears to be by the forms of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of Sky, Beyond Time, and Darkness. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy to able to believe about the fact that that particular anime special did somehow manage to able to came out in 2009. I'm guessing it's most likely trying to able to promote with the release of the forms of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of Sky. Well, despite the fact that according to the forms of that particular description for that particular animated special, that the animated special was first premiered during the forms of in Japan since in April 12th in 2009, which I've already explained about that earlier. So, and I'm pretty sure that particular anime special is like the story continues right after the Explorers of Time and Darkness anime special. So, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that, well, I've not seen that particular anime special for this point, because I'm pretty sure about the fact that I'm pretty much, back in the day, that I was sort of used to able to actually have not only Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Blue Rescue Team, but as well as the forms of Explorers of Darkness, as well as Explorers of Sky, back in the day. But of course, I no longer have those games anymore, mainly because I'm pretty much more accustomed to the forms of other RPGs for the time. Specifically, not only with the Mario Luigi games on the forms of, well, let's just say Partners in Time for the DS, alongside with the forms of Superstar Saga for the Game Boy Advance, as well as the forms of Bowser's Inside Story, as well as the forms of, the Paper Mario series, specifically the original Paper Mario for the Nintendo 64, alongside with the forms of the Thousand Year Door, despite the fact I haven't exactly got to the Thousand Year Door until 2015, just before when the actual today's economy for that particular price count for the sake of the forms of the GameCube release of Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door gets extortionately expensive, which as a result, do you know how much that game costs right about now? To be more specifically in the UK version, 100 quid for today's economy, and my god, no wonder why that Nintendo decides to able to remake the game on the Nintendo Switch, so that way it'll get us a bit of a better benefit for the sake of the forms of trying to go for that alternative, as opposed to trying to able to leave it behind. So generally speaking, I think that was actually a good move for able to actually just try to able to make, you know, Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door remake to exist on the Switch version. So, although, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that we haven't exactly heard anything about the game just yet, though, aside from the fact that we've only just got about almost a month left until that particular game decides to come out, which I'm super excited for, especially noticeable because it is so good that we can now able to experience the legendary RPG game again, but this time we can play it on the go, unlike the forms of how it does it in, maybe for the Origami King. Well, usually the Origami King is also the game where you can play on the go, although, unlike the forms of how it does it for its, the Dark Age of Paper Mario games, which appears to be Sticker Star, where basically a lot of people seem to have a miserable time experiencing the game just because of all this frustrating game mechanics and all that stuff, which as a result, I think it's definitely possible. I don't think I can probably tackle for that game, I must be honest here, because obviously I've heard so many bad things about it. Rouge, what the heck are you doing standing in the air? Like, usually you saw her right there, she literally stands in mid-air, like, again, it's one of those unpolished moments, which, as a result, nothing else I can really say, so... Which that reminds me about the fact that I don't know if it's possible about the forms of a fan-made remake of Sonic 06 that they might able to try to put up with, I don't know, like a hard difficulty setting or a very hard difficulty setting. Well, it's a bit difficult to tell at this point because I already know for a fact it's been about a year ago since that Chaos X did somehow worked on the forms of Silver's playthrough of Project 06 recently, and my goodness, it is so much more fun to look at. Especially noticeable because not only does it add some new intro sequences for certain stages, specifically with Crisis City, Tropical Jungle, as well as Kingdom Valley for Silver, but it's also worth noting for us about the fact that he's actually a lot more fun to play during the forms of Project 06 version. So, despite the fact I still haven't exactly experienced that particular fan-made remake just yet, because hopefully I will do at some point in the future, likely also to try to celebrate with maybe the 20th anniversary of the original game's release, despite the fact that the game is already, well, bad enough as it is. So, either way though, that's what I can really say about that right now. So, but as you can tell, since we finally managed to finish up everything in Crisis City now, so this means we're now going to be going into Flame Core for the final time. And as you can see, we're now going backwards, like proper backwards, order, because no matter what though, it's about the fact that unlike in Sonic's very hard mode in Flame Core, that obviously we have to go for the entire segments in the opposite way, likely for instance about the fact that we have to escape from the volcano in the first part, whilst in the second part we have to go back into the volcano, which is a bit odd transition, which I somehow managed able to realize that as soon as when I decided able to look back on that particular stuff like that. So, generally speaking, that's what I can really say about that, I guess. So, anyway, so speaking of which, though, is about the fact that, do you guys even remember when I mentioned about this before already? That we have to deal with the most annoying mechanic in Journey Forms of in very hard mode in Shadow's playthrough? You know, with that particular Chaos KO Kim mode you have to put up with. Basically, though, is about the fact that we have to able to, you know, flip through, you know, laser gates, alongside with the forms of trapped cages and stuff like that in one occasions. And I think we only have to do that particular technique for about approximately 3 times, during forms of 3 stages respectively, which is one of them we've already done, which appears to be Kingdom Valley, and the other one being is Radical Train, and finally Dusty Desert. And oh boy, Dusty Desert is going to be super duper lengthy as it goes on. So generally speaking, I was about the fact that you probably get the idea what I was trying to say about this, I guess. So, but yeah, for the most part for Flame Core, there's nothing right to harm about. I mean, still, no matter what though, we still need to able to hunt down for some of these keys to obtain, and relatively speaking, I was about the fact that, well, that's what I can really talk about that when it comes to Rouge's segment. And as far as I'm aware, we have to able to keep on collecting more keys again until whenever we get to Radical Train on very hard mode. And generally speaking though, yeah, that's what I can really say about that, I guess. So, anyway, let's get to the forms of the important aspect about it. And like I said before, we're about to be able to see who is the winner for specific catalog for the likes of the forms of, you know, 2024 BAFTA Game Awards winners. So, the first catalog, which appears to be by the forms of animation, and the winner for that catalog goes to Hi-Fi Rush. So, makes sense, because obviously no matter what though, the art style looks very impressive at the time, especially noticeable it came out in during the forms of in the next generation of consoles, specifically Xbox Series X, alongside with PlayStation 5 as well. So yeah, it does seem very cool and everything, and yeah, that's what I can really say about it. The next catalog, which appears to be Artistic Achievement, and that award goes to Alan Wake 2. So, yeah, that's what I can really talk about that. The next catalog, which appears to be Audio Achievement, and that award also goes to Alan Wake 2. So, yeah, nothing else to really say. And the Best Game Award goes to, much like the forms of how it does it on the Game of the Year Awards back in 2023, it's pretty obvious, Baldur's Gate 3. So, I was assuming about the fact that The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom will be on here, which it certainly did, but it did somehow get nominated. So because of that though, yeah, suffice to say that once again, Baldur's Gate 3 has once again become the dominance for the likes of the forms of that specific award for the Best Game Award. So, yeah. And the next catalog goes to British Game, and that award goes to Viewfinder. So, yeah, pretty interesting stuff. And the best debut game goes to Philip, I think that's as far as I can say about it, I guess. So, And the next catalog, which appears to be evolving game, goes to Cyberpunk 2077. So, yeah, I got nothing else to say. The best family game goes to, well, pretty obvious, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, because obviously everyone seems to love that game so much, myself included, especially noticeable because it is the most original, brand new 2D Mario game for the time, and relatively speaking, it is pretty awesome about the fact that, you know, the 2D Mario game deserves its awards. So, yeah, pretty cool stuff though. And the next catalog, which appears to be by the forms of Game Beyond Entertainment Award, goes to, let's just say, Takaya. I think it's what it says anyway. I apologize for that particular mispronunciation of that specific game title, by the way, because I already know for a fact it's been about a couple of weeks ago since I actually have last mentioned something related to the forms of the Game Awards announcements and during that specific time. So, anyway, the next catalog, which appears to be by the forms of Game Design Award. The Game Design Award goes to Dave the Diver, which, yeah, nothing else I can really say about that, I guess. But anyway, the next catalog, which appears to be multiplayer, and the best multiplayer game goes to, surprisingly enough, is Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Just because, like you've already managed able to realize, there is no collusion anymore, unlike the forms of how it does in on New Super Mario Bros. Wii, alongside with New Super Mario Bros. U, as well as New Super Luigi U as well, that basically does about the fact that sometimes players get in your way sometimes back then, whilst thankfully in Super Mario Bros. Wonder no longer has that particular ruined friendship kind of collusion by simply able to actually tossing one of your players into the actual bottomless pit anymore. So it makes sense to able to actually have Super Mario Bros. Wonder as a reward for not only for the best family game, but also with best multiplayer game as well. So yeah, kudos to that. And the best music award goes to, as usual, Baldur's Gate 3. So yeah, nothing else I could really say about it, I guess. And the best narrative award goes to also Baldur's Gate 3. So it seems to be more specifically that Baldur's Gate 3 is about to be receiving tons of awards during the forms of the most recent times. So yeah, it seems pretty crazy kind of thinking about it. And when it comes to the forms of the next catalog, which appears to be new intellectual property, I believe that particular award goes to Viewfinder. So yeah. And as far as I'm aware, the next catalog, which appears to be by the forms of performer in the leading role category, that particular award goes to, I would say, Ninjawi Jetra as Miles Morales in Marvel Spider-Man 2 on the PlayStation 5. So yeah, kudos to one of the actors. I think it's one of the actors, I'm presuming so anyway. And the next catalog, which appears to be performer in a supporting role, and that award goes to Andrew Wingott from the likes of as Raffrel in Baldur's Gate 3. So at least if I'm assuming so, that's what his name is though, I guess. So yeah, kudos to that particular actor who did somehow performed pretty good voiceover for that particular game itself or something. So anyway, the next catalog, which appears to be technical achievement, and the technical achievement award goes to The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. So because obviously no matter what though, it still holds up very, very well, and especially noticeable because obviously the sales for that game is doing really, really dang well. So generally speaking, that's what I can really say about that, I guess. And finally, which appears to be by the forms of EE Player's Choice Award, and the actual award goes to, once again, Baldur's Gate 3. So yeah, it seems about the fact that Baldur's Gate 3 has received a lot of awards ever since in Journey forms have been the Game of the Year awards in 2023, which was last year, and now we're able to actually receiving some even more awards from the likes of the forms of the most recent event since in about a couple of days ago. So yeah, that seems kind of interesting selection as far as I'm usually concerned with this stuff. So But anyway, as you can tell, we somehow finally wrapped up everything in the likes of Flame Core. Thank God, I don't want to touch that level ever again, because obviously that level is also very, not only, well, I will say the music is cool and everything, but I will say the level mechanics are by far the most annoying aspect, specifically in the outside portion of the level, because obviously though with all this, you know, molten rocks just keeps on popping out of nowhere, and to make matters worse though, that you're about to get hit a lot. So, generally speaking, that's what I can really say about it, I guess. So, now, as far as I'm aware, when it comes to the Falls of Rouge section in Radical Train, as you can tell, there is technically a bit of a glitch that you can able to actually perform by simply trying to able to skip this entire portion of the level. Well, I will admit it though right away, I was able to try to do that, but unfortunately though, that's not the case this time around, because I'm gonna have to do this entire stage in a normal fashion way. Although, to be fair though, is about the fact that we have to come across into this annoying mechanic again, ever since in Journey Falls within Kingdom Valley. So, and it's also very finicky too, when it comes to likely trying to perform it. Although, for the most part though, Radical Train is a little bit different, which as a result, we still need able to stop Eggman's Train, and if you're trying to play a Shadow, then you can obviously beat the likes of the forms of Eggman's Train in order able to progress. Whilst in Journey forms have been, well, only in normal mode and hard mode, that it's nothing right to hum about. But when it comes to very hard mode, obviously we still have to force the player as not only Rouge for the sake of certain progression, but it's also worth noting for is that yes, we do need to still once again collect all of those keys again. So generally speaking, nothing too special about it. Although, I'm pretty concerned about the fact that, relatively speaking when it comes to playing as Omega on this stage, I'm pretty concerned he will able to be on the second segment. So generally speaking is about the fact that that's as far as I can try and able to explain all of that. So anyway, let's talk about the forms of another topic at this point, and that's what appears to be about the fact that yes indeed, I've heard from anything for the sake of the forms of Cap King 74 recently, and he's finally gone back into the forms of uploading stuff again. Specifically, when it comes to not only showing off some extra content, but it's also worth noting for is about the fact that this is the reason why that he took so long to able to actually finally get back onto doing some more Let's Plays, specifically that he's still playing for Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix after all, and relatively speaking is about the fact that the actual section he did done, which appears to be not only the Mushroom 13, but it's also with the forms of the organization data battles. And relatively speaking is about the fact that, my god, I will say that the Mushroom 13 section is by far the most frustrating. Although, to be fair though, he did manage to able to done 11 mushrooms, no problem, except for one specific mushroom that he did somehow manage to have a lot of frustrating rage moments, and that's what appears to be none other than, you guys know what I'm talking about, Mushroom 8, where basically though we have to juggle Mushroom 8 and you have to get a certain amount of points in order able to actually succeed for that particular mission. Whilst to make matters worse though, is that obviously though the entire juggle aspect is incredibly luck based at times, so you never exactly know of where he's actually going to be able to change directions at one point. So yeah, before I get into more details on that, basically though, as you can tell, since no matter what though, as I said before, we still need able to stop the train, and obviously we have to beat the likes of Eggman's Train for about twice. And to make matters even much more frustrating, I will admit it though right away, when it comes to on very hard mode, you need to act fast in order to try to get past this part, because as you can tell, that this is what happens if you manage to you know, waste your time for too long. When it comes to likely trying to let the Eggman's Train get away, obviously you lose a life and you have to retry that particular segment again. So generally speaking though, it's about the fact that that's what I can really think about that. Whilst compared to the Journey Forms of Sonic story, that basically if you accidentally let the train get exploded by the forms of those flammable boxes, obviously though you also lose a life. So I'm guessing that Silver the Hedgehog is going to have an easier time experiencing Radical Train, aside from the forms of trying to navigate with those specific scales. So that's the only thing you got able to consider it. So either way, yeah, for the most part, that's as far as I can try to explain about this, I guess, for this point, folks. I mean, relatively speaking, though, is about the fact that, like I said this before, that we've only got about, you know, almost a month left until Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door on the Switch remake is going to be coming. And I think, if I recall correctly, we've only got about exactly 36 days to go around that time for this particular recording session, by the way. So, yeah, everything else goes all pretty dang well when it comes to likely for certain days has been gone, you know, pretty fast and all that stuff, which I think we've already on about that since during the events have been the past few days ago, relatively speaking. So, and no matter what, though, it's about the fact that, as you can tell, for the sake of the offensive, yeah, you see what I mean about the fact that I did manage to try to able to dish out as many of those enemies as I could in this particular section right there. But of course, as you can tell, the cage has not been removed. So basically, we have to put up with the of this technical advanced move, where basically we have to clip through the actual cage thing in order to able to do this. So, yeah. Still, it is incredibly finicky, especially noticeable about the fact that, again, if you do accidentally fall off at one point, not only do you have to able to grind as many of those chaos energy as you could, but it's also about the fact that you lose your score, and also, it's just not that very fun to me. And you see what I mean about the fact that when it comes to very hard mode in Shadow's playthrough, it's extremely not worth it, especially noticeable because there are 3 stages, like I said before, that requires you to able to actually clip through stuff without need to able to figure, like, well, I'm almost assuming they're trying to able to contain a pressable switch or something, but of course, no matter what, though, it's just about the fact that it's just too weird for my taste, and especially noticeable that it's probably the reason why, that I'll say this right now, I honestly do seem able to like going on to very hard mode in Sonic's playthrough, just because I still managed to able to enjoy Sonic's gameplay style a lot. Whilst I won't do the same thing for Silver's, but it's just about the fact that there are too many enemy encounters in Journey forms of Silver's very hard mode, and that's besides the point. So, but yeah, as you can tell, it might actually took me a couple of tries in order to try to pull this off, which I only know for a fact that there is a glitch that you can do if you're trying to play as Rouge at one point in this stage in particular. Basically, though, you have to do a bit of a timing syndrome where basically if you're trying to glide, and then basically, though, I have no idea what the heck just happened to that motorcycle for a second there. It seems about the fact that Shadow's almost practicing the forms of the parkour circus 360 spin with that particular tipping over with that motorcycle. So yeah, that seems really odd. But anyway, so yeah, no matter what, though, is about the fact that when it comes to the forms of that particular glitch, that you can to skip not only the second you know, the Eggman stopping the train segment, where basically, though, you can to skip that part as Rouge, and then basically, though, if you're trying to do a gliding animation, you can to actually do a high bounce technique. And what makes things a little bit better is that not only you can to skip that particular weird collusion thing familiar, but it's also about the fact that we can to skip, as I mentioned this before, not only just trying to deal with Eggman's train for the second time, but also with the forms of trying to find 3 keys in particular in order to progress. So generally speaking, though, I think, relatively speaking, back in the day, that is, on the 360 version, we technically did that back then, but of course we're no longer going to have to try to do that, because I will admit it, though, right away, it's kind of hard to do, especially noticeable, because I was able to try and do it on my spare own time, not only on the Xbox 360 version, but also on the PlayStation 3 version as well. Well, relatively speaking, though, it's a bit tricky to explain. So, as you can tell, on the second segment, if you couldn't tell, it goes by a little bit longer this time around. Not only we can play as Omega on that particular part, but it's also, it kind of reminds me you can to actually experience the Mark Speed section as Sonic at one point, except now that we have to try to deal the amount of damage to that particular Eggman's train for reals. But again, attack it from the side, and that's all you have to do for this point. So, kind of like the same thing on normal mode and hard mode. So with that being said, folks, is that we got the endings of this point right here. So join us next time for more of Let's Play of Sonic the Hedgehog or Sonic 06. Is that this is going to be the finale when it comes to this particular playthrough. That's what it appears to be. We're going through the final 3 stages on very hard mode as Shadow. So I'll see you guys until on Friday. Later, fellas.